What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero back with another Silly Snake format video, and this will likely be my last Silly Snake format video. Not because it isn't an interesting format and other decks aren't, meta defining in it. It's just there's a lot of overlap between decks in this format being good and decks in the next format, Joey-Pegasus, being good. And Joey-Pegasus is the more popular format. This is kind of like a hypothetical what-if scenario where we play Joey-Pegasus but with the Android format, limited list. I think that my Discord is the only place where we actually play this format, so if you are interested in checking it out, then link will be in the description down below. It's a great place to find games in this format and any other format I've featured on my channel. But before I left Silly Snake format, I had to show off a deck that would benefit most from gaining 3 copies of Graceful Charity, and that is Exodia. Now, obviously, getting to draw deeper into your deck with the triple Graceful Charity is super big for Exodia, and it also has some in-archetype discards that it's fine discarding, because if you discard any of the normal pieces to the graveyard, you can get them back with Backup Soldier, and that is actually a big thing that this deck does. That's why we play Painful to send the normal pieces to get back with the Backup Soldiers. So Graceful Charity is pretty great in this deck, even without Serpent. There are 3 Serpents in this format. I chose in my build not to play them, as I figured that I wanted to play more cards that are sort of gas. Now, there is one set of cards in here that isn't really gas, and that's Thunder Dragon. Thunder Dragon could be replaced with some Serpents here, I think. But I do like that Thunder Dragon deck thins for you, and also it is good discard fodder off of Graceful Charity as well. So with the Thunder Dragons and all the normal pieces, I kind of felt like Serpent wasn't really as necessary in this build. You can definitely make builds of this deck with it, and that may even be more optimal. We just haven't tested out this format enough to tell. As for the other cards in my deck, I'm playing 3 Mystic Tomato, which can fetch out the Sangan and the Witch of Black Forest, which can search out any piece in your deck. These are very important, and we're playing a lot of ways to recur them. Things like Premature Burial, Monster Reborn, and Call of the Haunted. So hopefully this will enable us to get a ton of pieces in hand through their effects. Lastly, for the monster, we're also playing Magician of Faith, which can recycle your powerful draw spells like Graceful Charity, as well as just your powerful destruction spells like Dark Hole and Raigeki, and your powerful defensive spells like Scapegoat. We are playing 3 copies of Scapegoat, as I do think that this is a major defensive buff to the deck. So I do think that playing 3 copies is correct here. The other spells are pretty much just standard power spells that would be good in Exodia. We're also playing these 2 Mystical Space Typhoon, which you may find kind of weird because, we're not really getting aggressive, so we don't really need to remove as much back row. But this is very good for Imperial Order, which can put a stop to our major Graceful Charity turns. So we do want to have 2 of these in the deck just in case IO does pop up. The trap lineup here is pretty standard, IO, Call of the Haunted, Mirror Force. We've also got the 3 Jar of Greed to draw deeper into our deck, and the 2 Backup Soldier to get back our normal pieces. The side deck is kind of a mess. I just sort of, put it together for testing just to see, if I wanted to make any changes to the deck. So I just filled this with potential changes that you could do. I think realistically the side that you want to do for an Exodia deck in this format is just a conversion smokescreen side. So that way you go from playing Exodia, which your opponent will likely side in 3 copies of Exchange against, to a more standard deck that makes Exchange or, any other card that they side in to face Exodia specifically a lot less good. But this is the deck that I took into some games, so let's see how they went. Okay, we've got a game against Soul65, a frequent guest on the channel. Always a pleasure to have them on. Let's see how this Exodia deck does going first. We are indeed going to win the rock, paper, scissors, so we will go first. And this is about as good a hand as you can get. The Thunder Dragon can get 2 more Thunder Dragons from deck to hand, which we can then pitch off the Graceful to get some major draw power here. And that is indeed what we're going to do. We're going to draw 3, discard those 2 Thunder Dragons, and then we're going to actually set the Mystic Tomato and just pass. We don't really want to set any of our back row as we don't want to lose them. But I do think that setting the Tomato was the wrong choice here. I think I should just set the Sangan, as then if I set Call of the Haunted later and they use spell and trap removal on that, I could get back to Sangan, get a search off that, and still get some value out of it. So I should have just set the Sangan here first turn. It's unlikely that they could assemble more than 1 monster on field to hit into our life points directly, and it wouldn't even be that bad if they did. So I think I should have just saved the Tomato for later. But I made the play I did because I wanted to just get more deck thinning. Sangan would have done the same amount of deck thinning here, though. It would have preserved board presence, but that's ultimately fine because we would have had the Tomato in hand. But we are just going to bring out this extra tomato there. They're going to set one pass back to us. We draw Mirror Force, which is very nice. We're going to switch that tomato to defense, set the Sangan, and then set a backup soldier and a Mirror Force. We want to set the Mirror Force here just in case, but also we don't want it to get blind sniped off an MST. So we set the backup soldier as a bit of a bluff. We've got an additional copy in hand, so we should be fine even if we lose the first one. They are going to just fire a painful choice here. So they'll be able to send 5 good ones here. They've already used up a Serpent off the Graceful. So I think we're just going to give them another Serpent here because, you know, they're going to get it back to hand anyways, so we might as well give it to them. They're going to go for a Snatch Steal on our Tomato just so they don't have to attack into it. And we are going to grab a piece off of this Sangan here. They're going to attack in for 19. We could potentially Mirror Force this now. But, you know, we're gaining 1,000 next turn off the Tomato, so I think this is ultimately fine. So we're just going to take that, and they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Monster Reborn, which will be good at getting back that Sangan later to get another piece. But I think ultimately we just want to set the Magician of Faith, get back like a Graceful Charity. That would be pretty good. We'll set this Call of a Haunted as well because if they do have Spell and Trap removal, we can chain it to bring back the Sangan. They're going to add that Sinister Serpent back to hand and add another Sinister Serpent back to hand. They're going to go for a Jar of Greed here, drawing one deeper into their deck. Let's see what they get. They're going to go for a Dark Hole, and I think this is actually a very good play on their part. Kind of unfortunate because we do lose our Magician of Faith, which is pretty rough. We would have liked to have triggered that, but we've got another in hand. They're going to bring out a Kaiku here, and they'll be able to banish some cards from grave with this. We are just going to fire a Mirror Force here just to get rid of it, because we do need 5 monsters in grave for the backup soldier. I mean, I guess, you know, we'd still have 5 monsters in grave after the Kaiku attack, but we also don't really want to lose the Sangan, as bringing that back with Revival would be pretty good at getting pieces later. So that's why I just, you know, fired the Mirror Force there. It's 1-for-1 removal, but I think it's ultimately fine. We are going to fire a Monster Reborn on the Kaiku, and this may seem a little bit weird because generally we want to use Monster Reborn on like our Sangan to get a search later. But the reason we do this is because Jinzo can be a real problem for our deck. So if they've got any form of revival to bring back the Jinzo, then we won't be able to use backup soldiers. So we just want to get rid of that first thing. So we bring back the Kaiku to banish that from the grave. And also Kaiku isn't the worst monster in the world. We'll just set this Magician of Faith pass back to them. We don't set the Scapegoat this turn, as, you know, we've got 2 monsters on field, so if they do have mass board removal, then we won't really be able to trigger it. They're going to go for the Sinister Serpent here, and then they're going to summon out a Gemini Elf. So it looks like they do have another way to get rid of this Kaiku. They're going to clear the Kaiku. We're going to take 100. And then main 2, they are just going to pass back to us. We draw a Jar of Greed, which is pretty good. We'll set that, set the Scapegoat, pass back to them. And, you know, we have 4 back rows, so this is a bit worrying if they've got Heavy or Harpy's Feather Duster. But I feel like okay about this. Most of this is chainable. We can't chain Scapegoat and Call of a Haunted in the same turn, unfortunately. But, you know, we can choose which one to do if they do have mass board removal. And the Jar of Greed is, of course, chainable as well. And the backup soldier we have an extra copy of in hand. So they're going to bring out a Kaiku here, and they're going to be able to hit into our Magician of Faith. We'll be able to get back a Graceful Charity off of that. They're going to try and hit in with the Kaiku again. We've got this Scapegoat here, so we will be able to protect our life points, which is very nice. And they're going to hit into one of the tokens. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw another piece of Exodia. We're going to just go for a Jar of Greed to start, because we do want to dig in deeper into our deck with the Graceful, so having more options here is pretty nice. We're going to go for that Graceful. They fire an Imperial Order, and luckily we do have a Mystical Space Typhoon, so that's pretty good. We'll be able to clear that Imperial Order, discard the 2 normal pieces, because, you know, we can get them back with Backup Soldier. And we got another Graceful, so we're just going to fire that as well. We draw 3, and again, we've got another normal piece, so we can just send that to grave with the Graceful. And I think we actually do have the game on lock here. We're going to fire a Premature Burial, targeting that Sangan there. And then we're going to attack in the Elf. We can't attack into the Kaiku because then we lose our Exodia pieces. So a good thing to keep in mind. We're going to grab this left leg of the Forbidden One in hand, fire a Call of the Haunted on the Sangan, attack into the Elf yet again to get back another piece here. Or we're going to grab an Exodia, the Forbidden One there. And we could just fire the backup soldier now. I don't know why we wait. We don't really have to. But, you know, we just wait for their draw phase just to win on their turn. So this will be the end of the game, and I really do think that that first game shows off how great Exodia can be at pulling off its combo. Having the 3 Graceful really increases the consistency of the deck, so it'll be exciting to see if it can continue that streak going forward. Unfortunately, after siding, this deck does suffer a lot. If the opponent sides in things like Exchange, that can be a real bad thing for this deck to deal with, and can be rough. So we just got to hope that we get a pretty good hand here. I think that this is a pretty good hand. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Thunder Dragons, so we're just going to discard that, draw 2 more Thunder Dragons. And we're going to fire this Graceful Charity. That's a pretty good move there. We could have potentially fired the Painful Choice first. I think in hindsight we probably should have. Just sending, 3 of our 4 Exodia pieces to graveyard and just having them for the backup soldiers later. That would have also decked in to make our Graceful Charity more live. The reason we fired Graceful first is because we weren't quite sure if we'd draw into backup soldier anytime soon. And we don't necessarily want the Exodia pieces just lying around in graveyard if we don't have a way to protect them from Kaiku. So I do feel like going for the Graceful first is fine, just to know what we've got to then plan our Painful a bit better. So we are just going to do this. We draw into 2 Scapegoats and a backup soldier. So this will make going for the Painful, dumping our pieces a lot better here, because we have ways to protect them in the Scapegoat and ways to get them back in backup soldier. So we're going to send 3 normal pieces, also 2 Jars of Greed, which are not bad. They're going to give us a piece here, which makes sense because they figure we can get them back with backup soldier. And we're going to set a Magician of Faith, set 2 Scapegoats pass. We could have also set the backup soldier, but I'm really afraid of them having like, an MST that they just fire blind into our backboard trying to hit a backup soldier here. So I figure that that can really backfire on us. And we can just set these 2 Scapegoat. If they do fire a blind MST into them, then we get 4 tokens. As we haven't actually summoned this turn, we've only set. So we can do this with reasonable certainty that it will be fine. They do indeed fire a MST here, and we get 4 goat tokens off that. So I'm very glad that we kept the backup soldier in hand. It was only 1/3 odds that they'd actually hit the backup soldier, but seeing that they went for that play makes me feel a lot safer in what I did. And I do feel like we've got a pretty commanding position here. We can Magician of Faith to get back like the Painful Choice or the Graceful next turn, and just try and get into something that will win us the game here. They're going to go for double Graceful here, and then they're going to fire a Dark Hole, so that will prevent us from pulling off the Magician of Faith, unfortunately. Luckily, we still do have a Scapegoat, which we can now fire after they go for the Mystical Space Typhoon here. And this feels pretty good. They've got to have like Raigeki plus Kaiku in order to actually get rid of the pieces. And unfortunately, it looks like they do. I mean, that is the power of multiple Graceful Charities. You can just sort of set up your hand in a way that counters what your opponent's doing. And this makes me really wish that we had actually set the backup soldier, because we could have backup soldiered, gotten back those pieces, because we did have over 5 monsters in graveyard here. But, now we've got to kind of just hope that we can win the game through other means. We're just going to try and wall up a little bit with one of our Exodia pieces. We've got the backup soldier here to get back some of our normal pieces after they get sent to the graveyard. But it's not looking good. This will be a pretty uphill battle from this point on. Not necessarily impossible, but, not the best. While we're doing this, I mean, the plays I make here are pretty much defensively, trying to stall out a bit. The Witch will help us a lot later if it goes through. But while the game's sort of going on here, I do want to mention that Kaiku is actually the reason why I don't really like going for a Penguin Soldier in the Exodia deck. Some people do play Penguin Soldier, as it is a way to bounce back your head of Exodia if your opponent does discard it, and there aren't really many other good ways to get back the head after that happens. So Penguin Soldier can be a good option there. But with Kaiku in the format as a much more common out to the Exodia pieces, I feel like the Penguin Soldier strategy just deals with a very specific form of your win condition getting cut off that doesn't really deal with the more major threats to the strategy in the format. So I'm less a fan of it. I know that people do like it as a comeback mechanic in a worst case scenario. I just feel it's kind of cope, and it's, if you do have to resort to that strategy, you're kind of already losing, because it's very convoluted to actually pull that off. But I just thought I'd mention that here while pretty standard stuff is going on. We did clear their board with Raigeki because we were about to lose, and now we've got a head of Exodia out to potentially hit in more later, because now our win condition is damage, unfortunately. They do have a Mystic Tomato here, so they can clear the head. And they're just going to pass back to us on that. We draw a Jar of Greed, so we'll be able to set that, set an Exodia piece back to them. And they've got 2 more sets and another set monster. It looks like they're playing around Morphing Jar here, which means that their set monster is likely a live monster, something like a Magician of Faith or a Man-Eater Bug or something like that. So I do feel good about potentially Change of Hearting it this turn. We are going to go for the Jar of Greed in case they've got an Imperial Order. We're going to fire this Pot of Greed as well. And it looks like they don't have an Imperial Order. We're just going to go for a Change of Heart here. Flip up what is indeed a Magician of Faith, so I feel very good about that. We've really got to think about what we want to get here. We could just get something like Raigeki just to clear the tomato, but we do have a Dark Hole in hand already, and we're running really low on life points, so I think we actually do want to get a Scapegoat here. Scapegoat will be able to help us wall up a bit and stall if we do wind up on the back foot yet again. And we are going to fire the Graceful now, and we're actually going to chain Backup Soldier to it, and this is a really neat play. We can add back the 2 normal pieces of Exodia that we have in the graveyard, and we can discard them off of Charity. So, you know, this is what I meant when I said it's kind of like a Sinister Serpent-esque interaction in the deck profile, because that can just recur value to then discard off of Charity, which is very nice. So it's part of the reason why I don't really think this deck needs Serpent as much. We're going to go for a Mystical Space Typhoon and a Scapegoat here, pass back to them. We could have maybe also set the call, but I don't think I wanted to load up my back row too much in case they had mass removal. Which they might have done, given that siding into that is not bad against Exodia. It's not the best, but, you know, if you have more ways to clear the Backup Soldier, the better. They're going to hit into the Sangan. We're going to grab another Mystic Tomato here. And they're going to fire a Forceful Sentry. That's really rough. We really did want that Faith to get back some of our destruction spells, like Raigeki or Dark Hole. But unfortunately, it gets shuffled back into the deck here. They're going to pass back to us. We draw a Graceful Charity, and we could go for that now. You know, it's good to get deeper into our deck to see more options to deal with this board. But I think we can actually bide our time a bit. We do have the Scapegoat set, so we're not dying anytime soon. And I do want to just get more value off the Charity. And so we're actually just going to set this Call of the Haunted, pass back to them. I figure if I draw another Backup Soldier, I can get full value off the Charity by Backup Soldiering into my normal pieces and then discarding them. And we're not in the most desperate situation right now. We do know that their hand is 3 Serpents plus an extra card that they just drew. So I feel pretty good about the board state as is. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Backup Soldier, which is exactly what we wanted. We're just going to set that, pass back to them. And they are going to just get into another one of our tokens. That's perfectly fine. They're going to set one, pass back to us. Mirror Force is very nice here, and we can now go for the Backup Soldier play. So we'll grab the 2 normal pieces off of the Backup Soldier, and then we can Graceful Charity that away. They're going to go for Imperial Order here, but we do have the Mystical Space Typhoon to shut that off. And this is a pretty good hand. We now have a Scapegoat as another defensive option, Mirror Force to block aggressive pressure, Imperial Order to stop any power spells that they may have. All we have to do here is really clear the tomato. Although we are on a bit of a clock since we only have 7 cards in deck, which does put us at risk of potential deck out even if they don't kill us through damage. So we are going to fire a Premature Burial here. I think maybe this was a little bit of a mistake, given that, you know, this does cost 800 life points and puts us in a more dangerous position than we were before. A Jinzo will potentially be able to kill us here if we do commit the Tomato or the Thunder Dragon that we're trying to bring back off of this Premature. We're going to bring out this Mystic Tomato here, fire a Call of the Haunted to get back a Thunder Dragon. Maybe this is a little bit greedy, as we could have potentially just set the Tomato, set the Mirror Force, and let them walk into that with the Tomato there. But I figure we got to get the aggressive pressure going. With Mirror Force in hand, I feel very good about this. The only thing that really stops us here is Jinzo. But other than that, I feel perfectly fine. So, you know, they've got to have exactly Call of the Haunted plus Jinzo pretty much, because they have used up all 3 Mystical Space Typhoons, so they won't be able to stop our Imperial Order here. So I feel very good about just setting the IO, the Mirror Force, and passing. And let's see what happens. They're going to go for a Graceful Charity. We've got the Imperial Order there. Unfortunately, they do have a Call of the Haunted, so that will indeed be the end of the game because they can bring back a monster, tribute over it for a Jinzo, and just attack into either of our monsters, and that will just be it. So that game, we weren't quite able to pull it out. You know, after the Kaiku banished the pieces from Graveyard, it was very likely that we weren't going to be able to win that one, but I figured I'd try anyways. And I do think the deck got surprisingly close, and we were in a pretty decent position at the end there, even if our opponent did manage to win. So, you know, I think that that was a pretty sick showing for this deck, although it does also show how fragile it can be once it loses its win condition. We're going to go first here, and hopefully we won't suffer the same fate that we did last game, and this is a pretty good opener here. We've got Graceful, so we can just fire that potentially. However, we're actually going to make the patient play here, setting a Sangan and a Jar of Greed and just passing back to them. You may wonder why we're doing this, as we kind of want to turbo through our deck as fast as possible, but the reason for this is that I generally want to get full value off of the Charity, so I want to be able to search out a normal piece of Exodia with the Sangan, then Charity discarding the 2 normal pieces, and then potentially getting them back with Backup Soldier later. So that's why I did this play. You know, maybe you could say that I'm being too patient. I should have just fired it. But I do feel like using Graceful Charity wisely is a key to making this deck work. And it looks like our opponent's just going to wall up as well. We draw Magician of Faith, so we could potentially go for the Charity now, just to try and get a powerful spell engraved for the Faith. We're going to Jar of Greed, though, just to see what other options we have. And Scapegoat's a pretty good one. We can set that pass back to them. I feel very good on our defensive axis here. They're going to go for a Jar of Greed of their own, draw 1, and they're going to go for a Graceful Charity of their own, and they're going to draw 3 and discard 2. And discarding that Morphing Jar, you know, it hurts to see, because to me that signals that they do have a way to discard cards from our hand, and that's really rough when you have the head of Exodia in your hand, because, you know, as I mentioned in game 2, we're not playing a way to get this back. I think that if you lose the head, you kind of just lose the game, even if you are playing ways to get it back. So this is very rough to see. They're going to flip up this tomato, though, and attack into our set. And it's a Sangan, so we'll add a piece, which makes sense if they do have like a Confiscation or a Dueling Doer or something. You want to fire it after we search off the Sangan, probably. So, you know, I'm still not out of the clear here. I'm very scared of a potential Confiscation coming. But it looks like they're just going to set one and pass, and I feel very good about that. I also feel very good about this second Graceful draw here. We're going to go for Graceful. They've got Imperial Order. We've got a Mystical Space Typhoon, and this is insane. We draw a Backup Soldier off of that as well, so we could just win the game here potentially next turn. We're going to go for the Graceful Charity, draw 3, and those are pretty good ones. The Painful Choice can potentially get us the additional pieces of Exodia that we need in Grave. Imperial Order insulates us from hand rips that our opponent might have. So I feel very good about this. We are just going to discard the Raigeki and a Mystic Tomato, as I think maybe I could just wrap this up now. It looks like I'm going to go for the Painful Choice here, and we are just going to send the normal piece of Exodia there. We're actually just going to send some just miscellaneous other cards. If they do give us like Reborn, Call, Premature Burial, etc., then I do think we just win the game, because we can bring out a Mystic Tomato, crash into their Mystic Tomato, get out like a Witch or something, while also reviving our Sangan from Graveyard to get a search as well. Actually, no, we'll actually have... Yeah, we'll just have 3 Exodia pieces engraved to get with Backup Soldier here anyway. So yeah, the Reborn, Call, or Premature Burial will just revive the Sangan and just win us the game, basically. But even if we don't, we've got Mystic Tomato crashing into theirs, and then bring out like a Witch to search out that last piece. So I feel fine about this no matter what they give us. They are indeed just going to give us a normal piece of Exodia here. And we are just actually going to set the Magician of Faith, set the Order, pass back to them. Also set the Backup Soldier. I guess the oh wait, we've got 2 pieces. Yeah. Well, I guess we still need to get that last one, but I mean, we can Magician of Faith back Reborn, I guess. I don't know. I think I might have just gone for the Mystic Tomato play here, because if I summon Mystic Tomato, then I'd get out the Witch. So like, I don't know. I guess the Witch would then be an attack, and they could attack Kaiku into it, but I'd still be able to have the Backup Soldier play to get back those pieces. So I feel like we maybe misplayed this. I feel like I probably should have gotten a little bit more aggressive. But as is, they're just going to blind Mystical Space Typhoon our back row. And they hit the Imperial Order, which is much better than them hitting the Backup Soldier, as that would be disastrous if they hit the Backup Soldier. It's still a bit risky, because, you know, if they do have Confiscation, then we do just lose the game here. But it looks like they don't. They're just going to go for a Gemini Elf, fire a Nobleman of Crossout, and that's very annoying here. So we'll lose our Magicians of Faith. But I do think that we just do win the game, potentially, if we bring out the Mystic Tomato and do the play that I discussed last turn. This is why I think we should have just done this last turn. But I guess they could have potentially, you know, not searched off the Tomato. and just left us with a lone witch, but it still threatens lethal. We just win the game here, though, because we can bring out Tomato, crash into either their Gemini Elf or their Tomato, get out a witch, and get that last search. So this will be the end of the game. I think I did misplay in the end slightly here, but I think that even with my misplay, this shows how powerful this deck can be with the addition of 3 Graceful Charity. So we'll fire the backup soldier here, and that will just be the end of the game. It looks like they didn't actually have a confiscation, so I guess I was worrying for nothing. But it was still a very fun game and a very intense game. You never want to draw the head, because drawing the head is really bad for this deck. But this isn't the only game that I played with this deck. We also played a game that's much more of a sort of jank matchup, but it was very fun. So let's show off that now. Okay, we've got another game against Soul here. We're playing the Exodia deck again. Let's see what they're playing. We're going to go for the scissors. So we do win that rock, paper, scissors, and we will be going first here. So that's pretty nice. And this is a pretty great opener, if I do say so myself. Wow. We're going to go for the painful first thing. And we're going to send 3 jars of greed and an upstart and a pot of greed. We do this because we don't necessarily want to reveal what we're on if they don't know we're on Exodia. And also, if they do have an early access to Kaiku, then banish our pieces. We don't really have a way to stop that right now. So we figure putting these cards in grave is good. Also, we do have the Magician of Faith to get back the pot of greed later, which is very nice. So I feel fine with this. They're going to give us a Jar of Greed. That will be nice to draw deeper into our deck later. We're going to go for a Magician of Faith and a Jar of Greed, pass back to them. And let's see what they do. They're just going to set one, set another, pass back to us. We draw Backup Soldier, which is super nice. Kind of unfortunate that we drew that this turn instead of last turn. Would have made painful sending the pieces a lot better of an option here. But we're going to go for the Magician of Faith. We could potentially now grab back painful, send the pieces. And I think that that probably is the better play here, given that we do have a Witch of the Black Forest as well to search out our pieces, and a Reborn to bring back the Witch. So I think we honestly should have just, you know, gotten back the painful, sent our pieces, and potentially just won the game off that. Unfortunately, we do misplay here going for the Pot of Greed. They've got Imperial Order, but we've got a Mystical Space Typhoon, so we'll be able to draw 2. And we do draw one of the pieces, which is pretty nice. We're going to go for a Jar of Greed, and that's fine by them. We draw a Change of Heart. No real need to activate that yet. So we'll set this Tomato, pass back to them. This is, of course, unfortunate if they bring out a monster and attack into our Faith. But we don't have any pieces in grave, so even if they bring out a Kaiku and do that, it's not the worst thing in the world. They're going to think about this a bit, flip up a Sangan, and attack into our Magician of Faith. We'll take 700 from that. The Magician will get destroyed, and they're going to pass back to us. We draw a Magician of Faith again, which is very nice. We'll set this Witch of the Black Forest, set the Scapegoat, pass back to them. This is unfortunate if they blind Mystical Space Typhoon it. We can't actually chain it here. But ultimately, I think we're in a good enough position that it won't really matter here. They're going to go for a Mystic Tomato, attack into our new set. It's the Witch, so we'll get another search. And now we're feeling really set if we do get a Graceful Charity. They're just going to set one, pass back to us, and we draw Sangan, which is pretty good. We could set that, get another search. And it looks like we will indeed do that. So we'll pass back to them. Looks like they figured out the game plan, so they're just going to switch that Tomato to defense, pass back to us. And this Thunder Dragon is very nice, as this is a way for us to trigger our Searchers without relying on our opponent's attacks. We are just going to set this Magician of Faith, though, instead of triggering our Searcher, and then set a Change of Heart, because we're at 7 cards in hand, and pass back to them. Change of Heart also doesn't seem like it will be that useful this matchup, as it seems our opponent is just walling up. So actually, I kind of have the read here that they may actually be on Exodia themselves. They're going to go for a Thunder Dragon, and that pretty much confirms it. There are some good stuff decks playing Thunder Dragon in them, in addition to like the Sinister Serpents and the like. But I feel like you mainly see that in Exodia decks. They're going to go for a Graceful, and if they are playing Exodia deck, this is very worrying here. They're going to discard the 2 Thunder Dragons, set another, and pass back to us. And Call of the Haunted is pretty good. We're going to Magician of Faith here, and again, I think I should, well, yeah, I should get Painful. We can just win the game off Painful. We fire Painful, send the 2 additional pieces of Exodia to our graveyard, except for the head. Tribute set over the Sangan, and then we get a last piece to hand, and we can back a soldier to the remaining 2. So I think I did kind of just make a huge misplay here, potentially through the game if they had stuff to do here. But we are just going to go for a Pot of Greed. I guess this does play around if they've got like Mystical Space Typhoon and they blind snipe our new sets. That would be annoying. We're going to Change of Heart their set just in case Magician of Faith. We're going to Tribute set over our Sangan here. Grab a right arm of the Forbidden One. And then we're going to actually set the Call of the Haunted, set 2 backup soldiers, and pass back to them. The reason we do this, again, we're at 6 cards in hand. And we don't necessarily want to discard them for no reason. We should just win this game. We've got Call of the Haunted and Monster Reborn to bring back our Sangan. And either of these should be fine. We'll bring that back, Tribute set over it for a Thunder Dragon, and grab an Exodia. And that will indeed be the end of the game here. So I don't think we played that game optimally. I think we majorly misplayed with what we got back off of the Faith, but we were still able to win, which was pretty good. I should have revealed hand to show if they were on Exodia or not. It turns out they actually were on Exodia here, which is pretty funny. We were just able to turbo into our pieces faster than they were theirs. So I feel pretty good about that game. Let's see how game 2 goes, because they very well might mix up their strategy. If they're playing a more smokescreen strategy, they could go into that to try and sort of cut off our Exodia access here, especially because you can play things like Exchange to make the Exodia mirror a lot worse. We will just be keeping the deck as it is with the Exodia main deck, as I feel pretty good about it until I draw double Thunder Dragon. That is... Oh, this hand is really bleak here. Mystic Tomato makes it a bit better. We'll discard a Thunder Dragon for a singular Thunder Dragon, so kind of unfortunate. We're going to set this Tomato, set a Jar of Greed, pass back to them. We feel pretty good about this. They've got Change of Heart, so they'll be able to take that. They're going to fire Mystical Space Typhoon on our set. It's Jar of Greed, so we'll draw one. And then they're going to flip up double Tomato and a Gemini Elf. So they're getting pretty aggressive here. It looks like they did smokescreen into a more aggressive deck here, which is a bit rough, especially when they get us down to 3,300 right away, which is pretty unfortunate. We have no pieces in hand and no real good ways to access them. Well, I guess there's a piece, but we don't really want that right now. We've got Raigeki to clear their board, and I mean, we might as well get aggressive because it seems like our opponent might be able to out-aggro us before we can actually assemble the pieces. We'll just set this Mystical Space Typhoon, pass back to them, but it's not looking the best for us. They're going to bring out a Kaiku, and they'll be able to hit over the Mystic Tomato here, which is very unfortunate. They'll be able to banish 2 from our graveyard, so they'll hit the Raigeki and the Thunder Dragon, which makes sense. We'll get out another Tomato here. We could have gotten out like a Sangan or a Witch or something, but I figured we just want to go aggressive here. Maybe this was a mistake. We do fire the Mystical Space Typhoon in the end phase, and it turns out it's a Scapegoat. And they couldn't actually chain the Scapegoat here, even though in this format you generally can activate Quick Play spells to turn this set. They had summoned Kaiku, which means that they can't actually play Scapegoat because you can't summon the turn that you activate that. We draw Nobleman of Crossout, which is pretty nice. We're going to reborn their Gemini Elf to get rid of their Kaiku, and we'll be able to get in for 1,500 damage total. That Nobleman of Crossout, we actually did side this in. I think we sided out like Forceful Sentry maybe, but the reason we sided this in is because if they were still on Exodia, this could get rid of their like Witches or Sangans, so I felt pretty good about that. Right now, it's more of just a bluff here, though. I don't think it will serve much purpose if they do have an aggressive out to this board. Luckily, it doesn't look like they do. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw another piece of Exodia, so, you know, we feel very good if we can actually get our Exodia piece strategy online. But, you know, just to play around Mirror Force, we're going to hit in with the Gemini Elf instead of attacking with the Mystic Tomato as well. But I feel like we're in a pretty good spot here. Let's see what they do. Looks like they're just going to think about this for a bit and then set 1, pass back to us. Magician of Faith is very nice. This gives us a follow-up play if we do walk into Mirror Force. So I feel fine about just trying to go for lethal damage here. 14 plus 19 should be 33. So let's hope this connects. And it looks like indeed it will. Yep, they just had a Mystical Space Typhoon and a Confiscation. So that will be the end of the game. But that was a really good game too. And I think that does show that this deck can occasionally go for an alternative win condition besides just Exodia. I mean, game 2 of the previous match also kind of showed that, but we did lose that game. This game shows that we can win it. I do think our opponent got pretty unlucky though, in terms of their beaters. But, you know, we take those. But I'm very curious to hear what you all think about the Exodia deck. Do you think that these games show that it's actually like a potential tier 0 threat, given that it's so easy to turbo into? Or do you think that the outs that exist in this format make it so that it's not even tier 1? Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with always. And if you enjoy my content, please do subscribe. I'm trying to reach 700 subscribers by the end of June, and we're almost there. We're at 680 as of the time of recording. So I really hope that we can make it. And also subscribing will notify you when I release new videos. And I will be diving into a new format soon. So if you want to be updated on that, then subscribing is the best way to do it. But I hope you enjoy the video as always. Until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.